Okay, welcome, and I want to go over how to write a DBQ. I want to go over some tips, and I want you to use this video throughout the study sessions that you're going to do for the AP exam coming up at the end of this year to recall on how to approach the DBQ, and I'm going to use the prompt that I posted in Google Classroom for Chapter 32. So the question is to use the accompanying documents to compare the impact of both political and economic crises on the Qing and Ottoman empires in the 19th century. So the first thing I want to do is look at how we score a DBQ and what components it has to have. It has to have an evaluative thesis that makes a historically defensible claim. Okay, so you have to give me an answer that addresses the documents and the question being asked, and you have to address all parts of the question. So you have to address the impact of both political crises and economic crises that take place in the Ottoman Empire and in the Qing Empire. And we have to put it into a broader historical context. So you have to contextualize your essay and tell me what else was happening in the world either before these events, during these events, or after the time frame of the question. Where does this fit into the scope of history? And the easiest way to do that, like I've been teaching you, is to do this in the introduction. To introduce the topic with the broad statement and then give background. What was happening in the world around China and around the Ottoman Empire that impacted? Okay? And so this is going to be in the introduction. That's how you're going to earn those first 2 points. Then you want to utilize the content of at least 6 of the documents to support the thesis. You want to use at least one additional piece of specific historical evidence beyond that found in the document. So you have to talk about other historical pieces of evidence that you got from your learning, from your reading of the chapter, from the lectures, from any videos you've seen, right? You don't have to cite that like of where you got it from. You have to show that you know more information about the topic. And then you want to give some analysis. Explain how the document's point of view or the author's purpose or historical situation, intended audience, how that's relevant to the argument. And you have to do this in at least 4 documents. And I tell you what, for each document to use the 4 E's, because if you do that, you will hit this 6 times in your essay, which gives you the flexibility to mess up a couple of times. And maybe, if you don't hit the target all the time, if you do this 6 times, there's a better chance you're going to get 4 times that you've done historical reasoning and analysis correctly. And so this is the HIPPO's analysis. So the prompt is to use these documents to compare the impact of political and economic crises on the Qing and Ottoman empires in the 19th century. So first thing we want to do, like I've told you before, step 1, turn the prompt into a question. Use the documents, right? Compare the impact, political, economic. How can I word this into a question? How did the political and economic crises in the 19th century impact China, which is the Qing, and the Ottoman Empire? What was similar about this impact? What was different? Right? So I'm putting it into answerable questions. And then when I read my documents, I would use my documents to do this. Then the next step I want to do in a DBQ is I want to brainstorm what I already know about the topic, because this is going to help me contextualize my documents or analyze and do my HIPPO's analysis. What do I know about the political problems? Right? Try to think of 2 things, right? Of the Ottoman Empire. What do I know about the economic problems, right? What do I know about the political problems of China? What do I know about the economic problems of China, right? So like for political crises, I could talk about the Tanzimat reforms, right? The wanting to westernize, the being taken over on ports by the Europeans. For economic crises, I could talk about the loss of revenue, Europeans gaining more of that tax revenue through trade having shifted away from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. For political crises in China, I could talk about the Boxer Rebellion, the Taiping Rebellion, right? Or again, the arrival of Europeans enforcing unequal treaties. For economic crises, the loss of silver trade because of opium, the fact that Europeans are exploiting, the fact that they're not industrialized or they're trying to industrialize, right? The 100 Days Reform or the Self-Strengthening Movement are also categories that I could use here. Then I want to set my historical context, right? What was happening in the 19th century, the 1800s, around the world? And if we think about what we studied, right, the shuns and isms, then it'd be easy. Okay, well, we see industrialization happening. That is going to impact these regions. We know imperialism was taking place, right? Europeans were taking over different lands and forming colonies. China was being carved up into European spheres of influence because of imperialism. We know Japan was undergoing the Meiji Restoration. Russia was industrializing with the Trans-Siberian Railway, right? We have new weapons that are being used. Okay, so these are all things that you can use to contextualize what was happening and then connect the topic to that. Another strategy for when it comes to writing the essay is creating 3 empty buckets. And as you read the documents, try to group them together based on commonalities. This is going to make it easy for you to write, right? And then as you begin to put documents together, you can kind of label the bucket. You can give each bucket a label or a name, right? Documents from China. These are documents about revolutions. These are documents that were written by government officials. These were documents written by commoners, right? However you want to do this, just create some kind of system to organize your documents to have a coherent essay. So let's take a look, for example, at document number 1, right? We want to source the document. What's significant about the author's point of view? I also want to make a little note on the side, AP, which means address the prompt. How does this reflect the impact of a crisis? So this is a letter from George III from the Emperor Qianlong of China, 1792. So what's significant? We have an emperor writing to another emperor. We're seeing 2 equals. So here's what an analysis of the document would look like. If I'm analyzing historical context, I'm thinking, okay, this is 1792. It's before the Opium War. It's before industrialization made Britain powerful. So when I read the document, I'm going to see an emperor writing to a king who are on equal standing. The intended audience is King George III of England, so it's ruler to ruler. And then when I read the document, I know that the purpose is to warn England to keep its merchants away. Right now, I know from history that England's not going to listen, but this is before any of that happens. So he doesn't know how this is going to go, right? He's trying to warn the English, keep your merchants away, keep your drugs, your opium out of here, right? If I'm analyzing point of view, it's Emperor Qianlong. He sees himself as superior, the Chinese culture as superior to the Europeans. When I read the document, I see that he refers to them as barbarians, right? So that would help me analyze the point of view. Any of these I could use in my essay. I don't have to write all of them, but when I'm interpreting the document, I want to choose one of these to explain why it helps me understand the context of the document. If I want to think of what I already know about outside information, if I'm doing a HIPPO's analysis, right? What's outside evidence? What's evidence beyond the document? I know that China had been more isolated, that they only wanted to trade silver since the beginning of the Qing dynasty. So that's an example of outside information that when I'm interpreting this, I can use this as part of my analysis. That will help me explain why England is trying to introduce opium, because they want something else to trade, right? And then when I read the document, I think of the subject, right? It's about China is self-sufficient. We don't need Europeans. Stay away. Now, how would this look in an essay? So if I'm going to use this document in an essay, right, using the 4 E's, I would say, to answer the question, right, what does it say about the political or economic crisis? I would say something like, in the Qing Empire, political and economic crises became more evident with the arrival of British merchants. Document 1, written nearly 40 years before the Opium Wars, right, I'm contextualizing there, shows that the British and the Chinese had conflicting views on trade. Now I give you an explanation of the document. In the letter from Cheng Long, it shows that the emperor believed that the Chinese empire was self-sufficient and British merchants would be turned away. For over a century, trade with the Europeans had been limited to the port of Guangzhou, and silver was the only accepted commodity, and as Britain became a strong industrial power, they began to want to open up China to its products. Right? So I'm giving you some analysis here. Right? So notice I don't have to give you my evidence yet. My evidence could be later. I can use the evidence here. Qianlong, on the other hand, believed the Chinese, quote, celestial empire to be superior to that of the, quote, barbarians, felt that China could function just fine without European goods, and missed an opportunity to engage in trade as an equal partner instead of having to later sign unequal treaties. So this would be how I would be writing within my body paragraph. When I would use this document, I use my HIPPO analysis in the first sentence. I give you an explanation of the document. I use evidence from the document on the last sentence, and I make a connection. I connect this to what does it have to do with the crisis. My elaboration is actually in orange here, right? I'm connecting it to why there is a problem, right? Looking at document 2, right? This is from 1852. It's after China is forced to sign unequal treaties with the European powers, and at the start of the Taiping Rebellion. The intended audience is the Emperor Jianfeng, and the purpose is to advise the emperor to fix the problems of corruption in silver prices. So the point of view is the point of view of Zhang Guofan, who is advising the emperor. He's probably a Confucian scholar calling for the government to take action because Confucians believe government should rule properly. Again, what outside information would help me make this document understandable is knowing that China had only accepted silver from foreign merchants and required all taxes to be paid in silver. It absorbed more silver than any other country. So this relates to the subject of the economic crisis. So this relates to the problem because it's about the economic problems due to silver prices, and it's about political problems due to people losing faith in government. Right? We already know there's a Taiping Rebellion going on. The government is being autocratic. It's not giving people a voice. So I would use this, if I were to write this again using the 4 E's. By the 1850s, China was facing major political and economic problems, including the Taiping Rebellion and high inflation. Right? I'm bringing in outside information here. In the memorandum to the Chinese emperor, document 2, Zhang Guofan is calling on the emperor to find solutions to major issues such as the price of silver and banditry. So here what I'm doing is I'm introducing the document, I'm bringing in outside information to contextualize the document, and I'm explaining what the document is about. So I'm using my first 2 E's, my example and my explanation. It is clear that political crisis centered around the lack of the rights of people had, quote, to have a wrong redressed, and growing banditry, which, quote, threatened the security of law-abiding citizens. So I'm quoting the document. I'm backing up my explanation with evidence from the document by quoting it. China was an autocratic state where the emperor had supreme power, and Qing rulers were not native Han Chinese, so many of their Chinese subjects felt the need to reform the government. Right, so again, now I'm giving some elaboration. I'm giving some analysis. Now I'm analyzing point of view. Since Confucian scholars take an interest in effective rule, it's obvious that Guofan is appealing to the emperor's sense of duty to encourage him to implement needed reforms. Right. And I would start bucketing. I would start to see what documents I could put together, right? So, and I would work through the same process through documents 3, right? This one is a journal published by Liang Qichao, China, 1902. Okay, he's this is a journalist, right? We know 1902 is after the Boxer Rebellion, so that I could analyze what was happening there. and that might help me understand that document. Document 4 is an imperial proclamation by Sultan Abdul Mahid of the Ottoman Empire. Okay, so now we're talking about the Ottoman Empire. We're looking at the point of view of the ruler. This document will be about the economic or the political crises of the Ottoman Empire. And then my next document would also be from the Ottoman Empire. And I would see how these connect. How do they relate? Okay, document 6, Sir William Eaton, A Survey of the Turkish Empire, London. So this is the British point of view, right? We would analyze how the British are seeing this, right? That might help me understand what's going on. If I learn from what the British point of view, it might help me understand the relationship between Britain and the Ottoman Empire and why people acted the way they did. I have a picture of the First Congress of Ottoman Opposition, 1902, Paris. Again, I use my outside information. These are the Young Turks, right? Because I know the Young Turk Party formed Western style. They formed in Paris. They weren't really young. These guys don't look young. Document 9 is an image from the days of the self-strengthening movement. I see some, they're trying to modernize, but I don't see many modern things in there. So this might help me explain the economic crisis of China. And again, I don't have to use all the documents. Here's another document showing an Ottoman capitulation, right? That's the political crisis, giving in to the Europeans. So when I've looked at my documents in a DBQ, I would ask myself, what are the impacts that are found in the documents, right? What were I'm supposed to compare the economic and political crises impact on these empires. So I would make a quick little list. And then which documents will I use? I will put them in buckets. I will or choose out of the 10, 6 documents to use. Which documents will I use to analyze hippos? I would make a little list. Okay, I'm going to analyze historical context of document 1. In document 2, I'm going to analyze point of view. In document 4, I'm going to analyze author's point of view again. And I'm going to analyze purpose in the document 6, whatever you're going to do. And then what piece of outside information? Oh, I'm going to talk about the silver trade, or I'm going to talk about the imperialism in India, right? I'm going to talk about what was happening in India and compare that or connect that to the Opium War or the Industrial Revolution. And then I would think, how can I situate these documents in the broader historical context, right? So the structure of your essay, if you were to write this, would look like this, right? You would have an introduction paragraph with an attention getter about the time period, some background to set context, what was happening in the world, and then your thesis. And that would already get you 2 points. And then the first body paragraph would be your first bucket of documents. And you would repeat that for the other 2 body paragraphs. So the conclusion is a restatement of the thesis and just synthesizing, bringing all the information together. So hopefully this presentation helps you learn how to analyze documents and how to use the 4 E's when you write about the documents. That's the important thing I want you to get from this presentation. So I will see you all in class, and we will be working on these skills in the next upcoming chapters. So start becoming familiar and start being comfortable asking questions of what you need help learning to do. Okay? See you all in class.